Thank you, Chris. I had asked Ryan to wear his costume. I said I'd pay him $100. He did say he'd wear a hat, though.
Yeah.
It's not the Macho Man
Actually,
Savage hat.
Actually.
Did you bring it?
You know, I did bring these out.
Oh, there we go. Yes.
I was planning to do it with these on.
Do it for sure.
There's like 20% visibility with these glasses. So.
You all look really good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, guys. We know we have a smaller group, but we know these are the warriors of home care who can party and be here through every session. So we're glad you're with us. I'm Gisela Doland. I've been in home care for almost 20 years. I was with Home Instead and Honor on the executive team, and late last year I went out on my own doing consulting in the space, and I love being back. These feels like family reunions, connecting with all of you awesome leaders in home care, and so it's wonderful to be back here. I'm also excited to be talking about family caregiving because, like many of us in the room, I've been a family caregiver for almost 20 years for my late father, my late stepfather, my mom, who's in her 70s now, and I have a 13-year-old daughter who still likes me most days, and I am clinging to that as we head into high school. But while I have a very unique experience that I think is very personal to me, I know it is not special. It's the Rosalind Carter. All of us are going to have been or going to be or are currently caregiving. And that's why we thought this was such an important topic to bring to this group and anchor our closing time together. And in a moment, I'll introduce Ryan and Angie, but I wanted to set stage for our conversation today for the next 40 minutes or so. You all know family caregivers. This is not a unique topic for all of us in home care and the various vendors and professionals who touch aging and longevity. You get that. But I think the theme we've heard, the theme of this event, is all about innovation and change. And this comes down to change management in our businesses and what we're doing. So while all of us have done yeoman's work to support family caregivers, and I applaud all of my brothers and sisters in home care, we know we need to do more. And there's this moment in time right now where we can lean in to the sea change, the awareness that people have around family caregiving that we haven't had until today. And we can be the leaders to drive the change we want to see, to promote the services and resources and value we all provide. No one knows family caregivers better than us. And that's very special. And so I encourage all of us as we leave today, we think about how might I do things differently in my business? Focusing on the way you look at family caregivers and how you evolve that is critically important. We all know the home care industry, our businesses rise and fall on two stakeholders, our professional caregivers, our workforce, and our family caregivers, those we engage with day in and day out. So we must continue to evolve that. And Angie and Ryan today are going to share some really practical things that you need to be thinking about as leaders in this space as we lead literally the world to better support family caregivers. I think the family caregiver role is unique for three reasons. I've spent a lot of time on this, both personally and professionally. And the reason it is such a unique role is the following. First, it is a role, if you think about the healthcare ecosystem and long-term care, where you're wearing two hats. And that's very unusual if you think about any kind of industry or role in healthcare. A family caregiver is wearing the hat of the provider. They are providing health care. They are providing support. They are helping with toileting and transportation and medication, all the things we see day in, day out. And also, they wear the hat of receiving the care, receiving the experience of the services. They're there with their mom in the ER. They're there with the dad getting your services to support their dad to give them peace of mind. That's super unique. A second really unique aspect of family caregiving is the universality of it. That doesn't mean our experience as family caregivers is universal. It is unique to each of us as humans. But 99.9% of us have been or will be family caregivers. Guys, what other role or experience as a human is that universal? Not everyone gets married. Not everyone gets to come to Napa. Not everyone's in our industry. Not everybody has children. But 99.9% of us will take care of an older loved one at some point. And when you have that kind of universality, what an opportunity for us to lead connection and change within that, because it lands and resonates with everyone. And I would say, what a shame we haven't spent more time focusing on this as a world, through our systems, our government, our healthcare. We talk about climate change, we talk about food scarcity, we talk about the advent of technology. We need to talk about family caregiving in new and different ways. And what's exciting is we're the leaders who know it better than anybody and can lead that change and advocate for it. The third way that family caregiving is a very unique role is that it's one that's often unknown. So for as universal this experience is that we go through, rarely do we talk about family caregiving in the past. often we just see the shift where all of a sudden we're a daughter, son going into caring for our older loved one or a partner or grandchild, grandparent. We don't recognize we're taking on and putting on a hat of a different role, like we do when we become a parent or we go to college or we start a new job. And when we step into new roles, what do? We search out community and connection. We search out resources and tools and all the things we need to do that job better as a parent, as a college student, as a new employee. If we're not aware of that as family caregivers, we aren't seeking out those resources and tools and things that we need to do it better. And those are the things that we all offer. So I would say, let's continue this conversation. Let's create a PR campaign truly about family caregiving in ways we haven't before. Let's think about our businesses and how we better look at the lens of family caregivers. And from the advice and expertise that Ryan and Angie and others provide us, let's do more, because it's going to impact all of us. So thanks for letting me set stage with those opening remarks. And now I'd like to introduce our two amazing panelists. I think you all know them well. Certainly Randy, Macho Man Savage. Thank you, Ryan. You always bring the flavor. And I do wish you'd put your sunglasses back on, but that's okay. So it's Ryan Iwamoto. And Ryan is a leader within home care. He's a thought leader. I've seen him speak many times. He does a tremendous job. He is the co-founder and president of 24-Hour Home Care. And that is a home care company that focuses on personal care services. They're in 4 states, California, Arizona, Oregon, and New Mexico. You have a census of about 19,000 clients, patients, family caregivers that you're supporting, as well as professional caregivers you employ. And Ryan's going to share with us the unique approach they've taken to engaging with family caregivers to grow their business. So Ryan, thank you for being here.
You for
Let's give him some love. Thank you, guys. Yeah, and we also have with us Angie Perone. I'm so excited to get to meet Angie. She is the director of the Center for the Advanced Studying of Aging Services at UC Berkeley. And she's bringing this very unique research and academic perspective to family caregiving. And what I loved learning is that Angie's leading the only academic research center in the country specifically focused on aging services. So she's going to share the unique research we're doing and how we might engage with that. She's also on the Faculty of Social Welfare at UC Berkeley. So let's give it up for Angie. And lastly, I wanted to open with this, but we need to give it up for the team at Influence Group, Chris, Michael, the whole crew, for putting on this awesome conference. We're giving some love. There's Chris, soaking it up. But thank you, sincerely, thank you for bringing us together. So let's open. I love this question. I always like to ask the why. We're going to start with you, Ryan. Why are you personally passionate about family caregiving? And then why are you passionate about it within your organization? And then Angie, we'll hear from you.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll first start off with, I think you need to change my intro.
Okay.
And add best dressed 90s, 80s costume.
Yes.
Home Care Innovation Forum. That is going on my LinkedIn profile today.
For sure.
Got to add that.
Probably your biggest accomplishment. It's incredible.
Well, and second, geez, you said it very well. You mic dropped it. I don't know how much more we have to add after your talk today. That was awesome.
Thank you.
But no, I guess thank you for having me. Thank you for coming out here and listening to our story. My why is my grandmother. And those that know me, I've shared this story before. It's not only just the why to do in family caregivers, but it's also why I started the 24-hour home care. So back in 2005, my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we had the challenge, like many people, of finding quality care for her. And at the time, I was working for a company called Maxim Healthcare Services, and I was in the industry, and we still struggled finding a quality caregiver for her. She's Japanese American. There's particular things that she looks for in a caregiver. Someone that could cook Japanese food. Mm-hmm. She wanted someone to speak to her in Japanese at certain times. That's a challenging thing to find. And we also found out too, is like as a Japanese grandmother, she ended up serving the caregiver more than the caregiver serving her.
Right.
And it's like, Grandma, you're not supposed to be doing that. So it was a challenge. And what happened was my mom left her job to be her full-time caregiver. And that was our experience with family caregiving. But I would also say I've seen the beauty and magic of what caregiving and specifically family caregiving can provide, because she was diagnosed in 2005 and she lived in her home with my mom as her primary caregiver to 2019 when she passed away. And she passed away at the lovely age of 101 years old.
That's amazing.
Wow.
And I can honestly share with each and every one of you, look you dead in the eye, is that she would have not been able to live that long and had just a great life living in her home without a caregiver. So I've seen the magic happen and also influence why we wanted to start 24-hour home care.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. Angie.
Yeah, so I have a similar story. It's sort of the flip side. So I have when I was in law school, my grandfather was diagnosed with mesothelioma, which is related to asbestos. And it's a very painful and very quick death. And so he needed several caregivers. And my father, it was very challenging for him to sort of see that. So I stepped up and became the primary caregiver during that time and learned a lot. And that definitely sparked my interest and awareness of the need for family caregiving. And then I went back to, finished law school and had a career as a lawyer and then a social worker and then also a nonprofit executive leader. And so throughout each of those experiences, again, family caregiving just popped in every, different ways in each of those different spaces. And so I feel like it's been a thread throughout my career. And then also I'm now directing this center, this academic research center. And again, family caregiving is a really important part of thinking about different threads of the different research that we do. And so I'll just throw out some statistics that I think are important to add to the amazing information that G provided earlier. So in 2020, we had family caregivers were providing on average about 9 hours of care per week. And again, the statistics vary depending on what data set you're using. But this is pretty astonishing and perhaps not super surprising. But in 2023, that number shot up to 26 hours on average. And of course, we saw that during the pandemic. And almost half spend 10 to 29 hours per week. 27% spend more than 30 hours a week. So Ryan's example, I think, perhaps is a good, perhaps an example of this sort of higher level of hours of care where someone is taking leave from their job to have a new job of full-time or even part-time caregiving. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your background as well. Ryan, we're starting with you. The benefits of engaging with family caregivers. I think, again, we all understand that. They're often our primary consumer of resources, but you've taken a unique approach in how you've leaned into particular family caregivers. Can you speak to that and the unique benefits and stats you're seeing from the effort?
I think it's like one of those rare scenarios where it is a win, win, win for all parties involved. And I'll go through each party. So on the client side, if I polled this group here and asked you, would you rather be cared for by someone that's a loved one, someone that you know, or someone that's a stranger? 9 out of 10 times you're going to say, I want someone that's a loved one. I used to say 10 out of 10 times, but then there's always that one guy that's like, oh, hell no, I'm going to be taking care of my family member. So 9 out of 10 times, right? And I think we all can understand that. And if you don't believe that, I can share our own data to show why family caregivers is so successful. So we looked at one of our brands in Oregon, and they do family caregiving. They also do agency staffing where they match the caregiver with the client. And we looked at our retention levels for our caregivers, annual retention levels. Can anyone guess what the annual retention of a caregiver working with that client? So what's the percentage of them staying with the client after 1 year? Take a guess. 20%? Yeah. It was 18%. So you have an 18% shot that caregiver is going to be with you at the end of the year. And the reason why that gets a little bit hidden is because I think as most agencies, when you look at caregiver annual retention, you're not looking at the retention with that particular client. You're looking at it, how long are they with you with your company? But we looked into how long are they with the actual client, and it's ugly. It's 18%. So versus on the family caregiver side, does anyone want to guess what that percentage is? 80. 90%. So you have a 90% chance that caregiver is going to be with you for at least a year. So not just from the client experience, but also like we all know the pains of finding the right caregivers and finding the right match and dealing with the calls and the call offs and the customer service. Like, it takes a lot of work and energy and manpower to do that, as we all know in this room. So statistically, you have a better match. It's a 5 times better match when you have someone that's a loved one. And for the caregiver, what we're seeing is a lot of these caregivers, these family caregivers, they're not sitting on the couch just collecting a paycheck. These are people like my mom who's quit their job to provide care for loved ones. So they're already doing it, but at least now they can get some sort of income to do what they're already doing, which is, in my mind, awesome. And then from a third perspective, the agency perspective, it's just a lot simpler, right? When you don't have to recruit or deal with a lot of the staffing issues, you can focus your energy on different things of running the business. So I think Home Care Pulse, you can look on their data, and the OpEx for a typical home care company is about 20 to 25% of revenue. For family caregiver run businesses that we oversee, it's usually half that. So it's a great way to simplify and really make things efficient. As we know, a lot of things are coming down the pipeline for us on the Medicaid personal care side. So I feel like it is one of those rare scenarios where it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Right. In a moment, I'd love to go a little deeper with you, Ryan, on how do you guys pursue that within your business? How do you ask a family caregiver about that? And so he'll share some of those tactical approaches, but it's super unique. Angie, let's shift to you. We talked a lot about, of course, technology, AI, this conference. It's about innovation, change management. We all recognize technology is the advent of a lot of that change. And so, again, you have this unique perspective we don't always hear from. Share with us what you all are seeing in terms of technology advancements with your center. You're probably at the cutting edge of a lot of that, on the spectrum of that tech. And then how do we as leaders know what to engage with and to get involved in some of that shift?
Yeah, so I think the key there is the spectrum of technology, and I've heard a couple of things that I think are really important to keep in mind. The narrow perspective and keeping, not being overwhelmed by the different technological innovations we have, which are impressive, incredibly impressive. But something as simple as if you have, a client or a family caregiver who is hearing impaired. I mean, we actually, our taxes pay for those folks to get free screens or particular devices that you can hook onto phones, and not everyone knows. In fact, a lot of folks don't know about that. And so that's a very low cost, very low tech, high impact thing that we can do to sort of serve the folks that we're serving. But then so I would say that's the spectrum, and then then we kind of go all the way up to the super exciting tech evolutions that we're seeing today that we heard about throughout this whole retreat. And in terms of things that I'm seeing specifically in this field that I didn't hear as much about yet, which perhaps folks have heard about in other spaces, but I've seen some really interesting technology that is really aiming to build empathy with caregivers in home care as well as family caregivers too. And so they're using like VR devices to train folks. And so there's this company called Embodied Labs that we've worked a little bit with that has that ability to sort of build these training modules. And you don't have to have the VR technology to do it. You can also access it in other ways too, which makes it a little bit more scalable and accessible. And then of course, in thinking about AI, which is ever present, one thing that I've seen that I think has some really interesting promise that I think hasn't been raised yet is thinking about how to coordinate and create cohesive care among family caregivers, among home care paid providers that are not family caregivers that are navigating climate change and the severe disasters that we're navigating, helping folks prepare before a disaster, during a disaster, and after a disaster. Heat is it's the leading cause of death, and older adults bear the brunt of this as related to climate emergencies. And that's a space that I haven't seen as much conversation about in terms of caregiving, and it's definitely something that, in terms of the need, that's another space that I think AI and other spaces could probably help streamline, as well as other kinds of interventions as well. And then in terms of just thinking of AI, I listed a few things that I've seen that some folks have already talked about that I think are just worth repeating is the use of AI in terms of managing home care plans, giving folks daily reminders, identifying resources, that's really important, remote monitoring, smart home systems, mental health support. We saw some good examples of that earlier, I think in the session yesterday. Emotional well-being, again, I talked about emergency response. And I think just sort of a note to add is that there is, and again, folks have talked about this, and you're aware of this too. I think there's a lot of concern and trepidation about the security issues, the privacy issues, a variety of different issues, and yet we also want to make sure that we give folks the opportunity to sort of leverage these without, missing out on sort of the different things that are still being worked through in all of these technologies. And so that's the space that I'm seeing a lot of conversation about, is how can we leverage this revolution in a way that's really culturally responsive to the folks that we serve.
That's wonderful. Can people connect with you, Angie, if they're interested in learning more about
absolutely
what's out there, what you're seeing, and pilots and things like that?
Absolutely. So our center is going through a big website rehaul, and so we have a website, but I would say in end of August you'll see the brightest, newest, and exciting sort of bells and whistles. But in the meantime, you can certainly connect with me. I'm accessible online and LinkedIn, and you can also come up to me afterward. And I'm very easily Googleable because I'm the only Angie Perrone in this space. So
Googleable, love it. Thank you for sharing that. I do think the care navigation space is one that we're seeing so much opportunity with tech. It's that you all are seeing so many siloed resources and innovations out there. It's like, how do we knit those together in a way that really meets people where they're at? And I think home care can really play a strong role in that, and working with organizations like yours, Angie. So Ryan, again, you've taken this unique perspective, bringing in families, known folks to the professional caregiving ranks. It's brilliant. We talk again about professional workforce, family caregivers, those being two stakeholders we've got to navigate win-win-win. How do you, practically speaking, go about that when you're thinking about sitting down with a family and navigating that?
I think the first thing that really caught my eye, you look at the family caregiver market size, right? So all the unpaid caregivers, informal caregivers, the market size is $650 billion. That's a B, not an M, $1 billion. That is more than the revenue of Amazon.com. That is 4 times the market size of home health care. So all of us put together, including DME, right? So you can just imagine like this huge market of people that are going unpaid for providing care for someone. Right, so there's a huge opportunity there. On the flip side, you go to any conference, and I think this was shared yesterday, and there's always a session on recruiting caregivers. This has been an issue for the last 10 years.
Yes.
Right? Every single time you're hearing about caregiver shortages, and it's not getting better, it's only getting worse, right? You can Google caregiver shortages, and you'll see all the graphs. It's going down like that. And it's only going to get harder and harder and harder. So it's like you have these 2 different challenges happening in silos, but is there an opportunity to take those challenges and solve each other? And I think that's what we really want to do. And the cool part is that family caregiving is now more on the radar. It's getting more publicity. And most states on the Medicaid side allow for family caregiving or being cared for by someone that you know. So, we are big advocates of that. And one of the things that we're seeing that's pretty cool is as there are caregiver shortages, we're seeing a lot of these family caregivers through our training, through our oversight, through our supervision, now become professional caregivers, going from family caregivers to now career caregivers. And you're tapping into this $650 billion market to be your source of caregivers now. So again, it's not going to solve all issues, but we should look at this because there's a huge opportunity here, and we're seeing it. We're doing it right now.
Angie, shifting gears, you were sharing with Ryan and I this concept of culturally responsive care as we think about supporting family caregivers in their journey, supporting their aging loved ones. Can you share more about what that means, and then why is it a benefit to us in home care, and what we should be thinking about in terms of culturally responsive care?
Sure. So I think in the research space, we've seen an evolution of language in terms of how we sort of can think about, sort of, it's interesting. There's this sort of like this interesting conversation about like, why do we use these words? Why do these words matter? And sometimes I feel that way too. Like, why do I have to constantly learn new language? And the bottom line is this, is that, you know, it allows us to think differently and expand our paradigms of what's possible, right? And so we used to sort of use, and I think a lot of folks still use the concept cultural competency. And the idea behind that is that, you know, you're serving the diverse needs of the populations that you want to serve. But there's this paradigm, right, with cultural competency that it ends, right? Like, I have now become competent in something, and I no longer need to learn anything more. Well, obviously, we know that's not true, because learning is a perpetual journey. So then in nursing, this concept of cultural humility emerged. And cultural humility is this idea that you are a perpetual learner, and that you can't possibly be fully competent in anything, because things are constantly evolving and things are constantly innovating, and also people are changing and society is changing. And so you're humble with knowing that you are a constant learner. And now we have this concept that sort of builds on that, which is culturally responsive, which is not only am I going to be a perpetual learner, but I'm also going to be responsive to the learning needs and the evolution of learning and the ways in which my populations are evolving. So thinking about just generational differences, like what are family caregivers who are baby boomers going to need versus X-Geners versus millennials versus Z-Gen. I mean, we have Z-Gen family caregivers who are now in their late 20s who are absolutely 100% doing family caregiving, and those needs are different. So cultural responsive care would be thinking about how to serve these diverse communities in different ways and being responsive to those needs. And I'll give you another example. So I have a thread of my research, and part of the work that we do is looking at LGBT older adults and aging. And so there's been a huge emphasis on aging in place, which is very important, and of course very important in this space. And what we found was in various communities that we were working with is that yes, folks wanted to age in place, but what they really wanted was to age in community. So they were actually very open and willing to move from their home to find another place, another home, or a shared home or co-housing or a variety of different arrangements that allowed them to feel where they could feel safe and comfortable and affirming and age in a space where they could be out, essentially. And so it was this flip on aging in place to aging in community. And so by knowing that, like thinking about culturally responsive care, like you could adapt your models to serve folks who are aging in place, but not necessarily in their home in the same place that they've grown up or they've been in for like 10 years or something. And so that's just another example of thinking about culturally responsive care.
That's fantastic. And we think about, as leaders, we have looked at this like one caregiver to one older adult in a home. What we've heard, and especially as we see more older boomers, they want community. And we're going to see more of these, assisted living, independent living spaces. And what an opportunity for us to help navigate that and support that in ways. And we think about Ryan's story of his grandmother. I mean, that was culturally responsive care.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that, and what a beautiful story, 101 years old if you do that right. So, Ryan, let's shift to one of our favorite topics, navigating payer source. In addition to healthcare being very broken, part of it is because it's so linked to payer source in America. And so we know one of the biggest issues family caregivers are struggling with is how do I help my mom or dad navigate long-term care, VA benefits, all the things. And I know you've taken some unique approaches to helping caregivers navigate Medicaid and some other programs. Can you share more about what you're doing and how you're helping lead family caregivers through that to lift some of that stress and burden?
Yeah, so most of our family caregiving programs are on the Medicaid side. And I think Medicaid has taken a really forward approach in allowing caregivers or known caregivers to provide services for a Medicaid member. But there's a lot of work to do because Medicaid is only a certain percentage of the population. Middle income, what are they going to do in terms of finding caregivers? Because there's got to be a payer for it. So I think there's more we can do on the long-term care insurance. You mentioned VA as well as another one. But there's a lot of perception and bias around family caregivers, like should they get paid? And I literally just had a recent example of that. So we're in New Mexico. We have a brand out there. And was there anyone in New Mexico, from New Mexico here? Okay, maybe you need to cover your ears here for a second. No, we're in New Mexico, and we are working with the VA. I think some of you guys will also work with the VA. And they called an emergency meeting for all the providers on their home health aid, homemaker program. And it basically just reamed all of us and say, hey, you guys are not providing great service. We have this wait list of 140 veterans that are not getting care because you cannot staff it, or we are getting all these complaints of turnover and bad matching. So I raised my hand on Zoom and I said, hey, what about the opportunity to use maybe a family caregiver, a known caregiver? Completely shut down for two reasons. One, a family member should not get paid to provide care. That's like sort of your obligation as a family member. And number two, if it's a known person that's not a family member, that also is not going to work because they are going to abuse the veteran and take advantage of them. So it's these like biases and assumptions that at least one of my like sort of purposes and missions is to really debunk that.
Yes.
Because we have 19,000 examples of that not happening, leveraging a family caregiver, and the magic and beauty that has been created by leveraging that to provide care.
That's wonderful. It's a great pivot, Angie, to you then to talk about policy and advocacy, what we're seeing with family caregiving. And I think we had a great stage setting yesterday with the Senator Stabenow. She's fantastic, and all of her work to support family caregivers. What are you seeing in terms of policy and advocacy? And then specifically, I'd love to get into the topic of, should family caregivers get paid? And it is controversial.
Yeah.
This is where do we come up with those resources? But there is such demand and some such need.
Well, what's interesting is, so that fraud question is so pernicious, and we had that question in the audience too, and it's persistent too. And so I think data, we need research and data that shows that that's not happening, because we do know that that's really just, it's a myth. And so yes, there are examples of that happening, but it's not the norm. And so I think the Senator Stabenow said, we just need advocacy to really show that that's not what's happening. And so data and advocacy, I think, are really important there. And then family caregiving is really, I think the perception about it has really shifted. And this happened before the pandemic. And so in 2018, Congress passed the RAISE Act, which established a Family Caregiving Advisory Council, and has done a number of other things. And what it did was it also allowed states to sort of experiment and sort of be a little bit more proactive. And then the pandemic just shot that forward. And so I think a lot of folks are probably aware of different opportunities that states have taken to expand waivers and allow family caregivers and care partners to be paid. And while some states have eliminated that since the public health emergency has ended, a number of states haven't. And so there are opportunities for folks to really build your caregiving network and your caregivers. And a lot of that came from advocacy and policy efforts. The one thing from folks in this room and others, the one thing I would say though is I think it is very challenging right now in this space, political space and political moment and political time, to have, this is my perception, is to have a standalone bill that would possibly succeed without having a larger vehicle to attach it to. Not impossible, but it would be challenging. And so I think that's where swinging back to the first session is collaboration is really key, and finding collaborative partners to build some sort of legislation. Or another thing that's really, so I'm diverting a little bit.
We got time.
Another successful avenue, in addition to legislation and thinking about policy and advocacy, is the behind-the-scenes administrative, what's happening with administrative, executive efforts, right? So I think there are ways to work within administrative agencies to do all sorts of interesting, like issuance, guidance, directives that can actually be way more impactful and much more likely to happen outside of legislation, which I think is going to be a little bit more challenging right now, at least a standalone bill. So anyway, I think that's.
I love that. And I think the Senator said to us, tell the story.
Yeah.
We open with the why and the storytelling. You all have really powerful stories from the work you do, the industry to share, that opens the eyes of policymakers. And again, because family caregiving is so universal, what you'll find in those conversations, I'm sure you all have, is everyone's like, you know what? We just took care of my dad. Totally understand what you're talking about. Or my mom was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We're looking for care. Tell me more about home care. There's such opportunity, and it's a fairly easy lift if you focus on it. So there's that opportunity. The other thing about paying family caregivers, the controversy around that is, where do we find the resources? If we aren't doing that, we're going to pay it on the other side with increased healthcare costs, the social programs that we have to prop up to support older adults in need because the family caregivers supporting them either aren't there or aren't getting the help they need. So couldn't we proactively support the family caregivers, which would then save costs, as we all know from the work we do on the other side with chronic condition management and ER visits, reducing those, that kind of thing. So, Ryan, you talked a bit about what you're seeing with family caregivers in terms of, and this is, we're about to wrap here in just a minute, but about being paid for that. I would love to just get your take on what family caregivers say to you, because you're in the field connecting with them. They are being paid by these programs or become professional caregivers of your organization. What is the sentiment there?
Yeah, I think for the most part, and this is more anecdotal, and I do think like for us to really win this is we got to provide the data, we got to continue to share the stories, but the stories are beautiful stories. They are just like my mom. They are ones that have left their jobs and that are now caring for a loved one. And now instead of having to deplete their 401k or tap into their life savings and use that to support themselves because they are now caring for their loved one, a lot of these people are already doing it. Now they're getting paid and have that opportunity to support themselves. Those are the stories. And some of the things we're also seeing too is like, we are in the business of trying to find and make sure that people that are getting their caregivers, that it's known to them. So just simply asking the question, is there someone in your network that can be a care provider for you? And it's pretty amazing that some of these people are finding in their community. We had one person found someone in their church. We had another person that hired their Walmart greeter as their caregiver because they saw him like every single week and they wanted more work.
Yeah.
We do a lot of kids work, and one of the caregivers ended up being part of a Pokemon club that the staffer was a part of because the kid was a fan of Pokemon and like created this relationship between them. So like these stories are amazing, but I think it's our job is to get those stories out there, get it to Congress, get it to the legislative bills to show like the importance of these family caregivers and what impact they can make, not just financially, but emotionally as well.
Beautifully said. All right, we're just about to wrap our session, so I'd love final thought. And the topic is, if we could make one change today, Angie, Ryan, as you think about the world, what is one thing we could do, one change you would like to see so we could better support family caregivers?
I think for me, one of the biggest changes is really breaking down the silos and thinking about collaboration and including researchers, such as our center and others who are, have the knowledge and also the passion to really elevate these issues and also have the skills and the training to like package the data, and also stories are data.
Yeah.
And so making sure that we can sort of collaborate on ways to elevate this issue in a variety of different audiences.
Right.
Yeah, I would add two things. One on the sort of business side for all of you here, and then one just more maybe for Home Care Innovation Forum. Number one, on the business side, can family caregivers be part of your strategy? We went all in on family caregivers. We burned our boats, and we went all in on it. But like, can it be a part of your strategy? And some people might say, why the heck are you sharing that with others, inviting other people into the space? To me, the competition is not all of you. The competition is winning the hearts and minds that family caregivers should be a part of this healthcare system. It is the backbone of the healthcare system,
Yes.
and we need to reinforce it, not take away from it. So that's number one. Number two, we know Bradley Cooper is producing a documentary on family caregiving. Home Care Innovation Forum, Bradley Cooper, keynote session.
Yep, next year.
You want to fit the bill?
Yeah.
I'd be happy to have it. Sure.
Yeah, those are my
I love it.
takeaways.
Yeah, that's a great pivot. So just on that note, Bradley Cooper took care of his father who was dying of cancer, and he's really passionate about family caregiving in addition to being a fabulous director, actor, all the things. Kind of cute. But yeah, definitely people want him as a keynote, Chris. But he quietly started a foundation several years ago, and he's going on different tracks on how do we empower family caregivers. It's all about that. So the documentary is one piece of that. Grants, I think, Andrew, you're probably familiar with grants to pay family caregivers. And then I'm actually involved in another piece of it, and it is how do we bring celebrity and media together to converge to basically do that PR campaign around family caregiving. In America, we like to listen to the celebrities. We listen to Taylor Swift. We, listen to Bradley Cooper when they talk about these things. And to get that voice of our industry amplified in the way with celebrity media, it's coming, guys, and it's going to be here. And so in addition to the fabulous information and ideas that Ryan and Angie shared, I would encourage you, as there's these opportunities for us to come together as an industry, do the PR campaign. If you want to get involved with One Family, come speak to me. We need to lean into that leadership position because, again, we are the ones who know family caregivers better than anyone. And now is the time for us to raise our voices, give voice to the voiceless, and make the change we really want to see in the world that we all know needs to happen. So with that, please thank Ryan and Angie for being just fabulous leaders and panelists.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.